There's a long historical precedent of people, men, in power, othering and vilifying groups of people to sow division amongst the population and to create and strengthen their own power base. In How to Kill a Witch, Zoe Benitazzi and Claire Mitchell trace the history of the witch hunts in Scotland, illustrating how this played out in the Scottish witch hunts and highlighting how it continues today. And as they emphasize throughout, they didn't burn witches, they burned women. This book draws heavily from original source materials, including a witch hunt manual written by King James, yes, that King James, and church records, as well as interviews with expert scholars who devoted decades to studying this topic. And through those accounts, we learn that one, King James exploited and amplified fears and allegations of witchcraft in Scotland by writing an instructive manual on identifying and examining witches, by conducting his own investigations of witches, and by enshrining the investigation and execution of witches in law. He did this mainly to break from the Catholic Church and emphasize the difference between himself, who was a Protestant ruler in a country that had recently broken from the Catholic Church, and to enhance his own legitimacy as the God ordained rightful Protestant Christian ruler of Scotland and England. So, in other words, he did this to gather, enhance, and consolidate his own claim to power. This fueled a long period of witch hunts in Scotland, which snared more people than witch hunts in other areas of Europe or even in Salem. Key themes of these witch hunts included that they flared up during times of increased social change or unrest. So, political turmoil, transition of social institutions, changes within the church, hunger, financial strain, illness, disease. These time periods that destabilize communities and destabilize things from a social standpoint enhanced fears and uncertainty and coincided with times of increased witch hunt activity. During the times when the witch hunts flared up, the people who were targeted in those communities were those who were vulnerable. They were marginalized. They were otherwise othered by the ruling class. So, women, the poor, elderly, people with physical disabilities or developmental differences, people who had symptoms of mental illness, people who questioned or existed outside the expectations of authority. These were the folks who are most likely to be targeted by both the church or the social power structures and also by other members of their own community. Once an accusation was made, folks faced brutal interrogation and dire consequences, in many situations, gruesome executions. And for most folks who were accused, especially during the height of the witch hunt era, accusation was a death sentence in many cases. And the terror associated with that incentivized people to turn against one another to illustrate their own goodness or adherence to the social order, or to protect themselves from the brutality. It was a very common feature of interrogations for the person who was accused to be enticed to generate other names of folks to accuse who would then be interrogated themselves. Very often, folks did produce other names, in part because interrogations under torture or brutality do not yield accurate information. We know that from scientific and psychological research. These dire consequences, this brutal treatment, amplified fears and uncertainty. So we have fear and uncertainty and social unrest increasing the witch hunt activity from time to time across different communities. But then once the witch hunt started, it amplifies fear and uncertainty and accelerates everything. Fear related to times of social stressors combined with fear of being accused and harmed to make a very unsafe situation for everybody. And another function was that the witch hunt activity served to police adherence to strictly defined social norms, especially around gender behavior. Because anybody can make an accusation, because the witch hunts were endorsed by the church and the government, because opposition to the witch hunts could bring suspicion to your door, there were people who exploited this as a way to gain more personal power and influence and wealth as witch finders and interrogators. And of course, that served to accelerate the whole situation as well. And because witches were cast as people who rejected God, as people who sought evil, as people who were intentionally testing the faith and the church and the social order, they were erased. Their names and stories were rarely recorded, and when the witch hunts did fade, the country moved on and tried to let it fade from memory. Zoe and Claire argue rightly that this was not an isolated event belonging to our long-distant past. This is not ancient history, and this is not something that's irrelevant to our current experiences. It's essential for us to understand the factors that enabled this to happen and that perpetuated it, because people are still people, and we are still vulnerable to the same factors that contributed to this experience. To illustrate that point, they trace the evolution of witchcraft laws, not the elimination of them, the evolution of witchcraft laws until the 20th century, and tell the story of the last woman who was prosecuted in the UK for witchcraft, which happened in World War II. Violence against people, mostly women, accused of witchcraft continues in the 21st century as well. This is not ancient history. This is not done. Between 2010 and 2019, more than 20,000 instances of witchcraft-related harm and violence were reported around the world. We don't know how many more instances occurred that were never reported. Zooming out at a broader level, we see ongoing and intensifying talk about women's natural roles. We hear more and more conversation around gender being something that's essentially encoded as part of biological sex and part of a natural order, and there being a preordained way that women are supposed to function in the world, by contrast that men are supposed to function in the world. And vilifying or othering people who do not adhere to these strict culturally defined gender norms. We're also seeing more and more dogmatic talk about gender roles and limiting activities of women specifically to the home and family spheres, and pulling more out of public life, or stepping more out of public life for women, and seeing this intersect with very conservative, traditional, evangelical Christian ideas here in the US. So Zoe and Claire caution us that accusations against the vulnerable in society don't happen out of the blue, and they accelerate during times of change and unrest. They also walk us through how this could unfold following the patterns that we've seen from the past play out in the modern era. During times where we have significant political unrest, we've seen major social changes, we see a rapid acceleration of social media use and breaking down boundaries around how we used to be able to communicate with who and from how far away, and the timeliness of that communication. We've been through a lot of change in a short period of time, and as they were saying, periods of unrest, periods of discord can be vulnerable moments. So they walk us through a scenario where this could happen in the modern era. They say, first, when times are bad and people are scared, there are wild allegations of witchery, women who have devilish powers and are in league with Satan. This nonsense is believed by no one but the most tinfoil hat wearing of conspiracy theorists. But these witchcraft accusations are repeated till they become background noise, right? And with background noise, it's there, we're hearing it out of the back left corner of our head maybe, and we habituate to it. No one in power intervenes to deny such allegations. Then in time, support is found for the allegations. In the old days, it would be a witness, a document. Now it might be a video, it might be a TikTok. Are they real pieces of evidence or fraudulent? Are they made by AI? Few know, few care. And I think this is important, especially in our current context where AI-generated images and AI-generated speech is booming. And research shows that large swaths of the population have significant difficulty distinguishing between AI-generated content and human-generated content. And the sophistication of AI forgeries and artificially created images is increasing significantly. Discussions take place on the basis that there's some proof of witchcraft. Now the accusations seem less crazy. You know someone who knows someone who knows someone who was affected by a spell. The witchcraft allegations become mainstream, talked about on daytime TV. The pros and cons are debated publicly. Who are the witches? Join us after the break when we discuss who they are and how to spot them. Have you been affected? Call our hotline. A political party, realizing the popularity of the witchcraft accusations, adopts what was once a wild allegation believed by no one as an issue that now must be addressed. Because if one thing we know is, if there is a topic or an issue that catches fire, if there's something people are paying a lot of attention to, that's going to pull folks who are looking for the PR or the buzz or the clout, and they're going to engage with it. The topic gains support, the party is voted in, soon an issue is proposed in the legislature and voted on by the politicians. Then it becomes law. And it's coming for you. But I'm not a witch, you say. Surely this is madness. And people can see that, right? Wrong. You're accused in a court of law. Evidence is gathered. The trial takes place, and after conviction, you're sentenced to execution. So, how do we prevent history from repeating itself in this way? Zoe and Claire have some specific recommendations. They boil down to, do not let the patriarchy silence us. Call out misogyny, challenge the norm, advocate for equality, advocate for rights to continue to be enshrined in legislation, push back against the creep. And when we hear allegations, or we hear some of this conversation, or we hear some of the conspiracy stuff that gets out there on the internet, be quarrelsome about it, speak out against it, offer information to the contrary. So I highly recommend this book. Again, it's How to Kill a Witch by Zoe Venditazzi and Claire Mitchell. It's incredibly well researched, incredibly relevant. There are a lot of resources attached to it, including references to organizations that are working worldwide to protect the rights and the well-being of people who have been falsely accused of witchcraft in all corners of the world. Also, this is a book that I will be creating a granny square to add to my Books of the Year blanket. In just a moment, we'll transition over to a tutorial showing you how I put that together. In the meantime, if you'd like to see more content, please like, comment, subscribe, share, and I look forward to bringing more videos. So in this quick tutorial, I'll show you the design process for my Witches of Scotland granny square. I'm starting with a basic start to the granny square. I'm doing 4 clusters of 3 double crochet into a magic circle. Between each cluster of 3 double crochet, I'm doing 2 chain stitch for the corners. If you've seen my other granny square tutorials, or if you've done a granny square before, you're familiar with this start. For the second row, I'm doing a solid granny square row of double crochet stitches. So I'm doing each corner is 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, and then I'm doing a double crochet in each stitch around the square. After this row, I will do 1 row each of single crochet in the pink, gray, and red yarn. For each solid single crochet row, it'll be 2 single crochet, 2 chain, 2 single crochet in each corner, and then a single crochet in each stitch along each side. The colors were chosen intentionally to be the same colors as in the official Witches of Scotland tartan, which was officially registered with the Scottish Register of Tartans in February 2025 to commemorate the witch trials in Scotland. Each color chosen for the tartan has a significance. Black and gray represent the dark times and the ashes of those who were persecuted. Pink and red signify the legal tape that bound the fate of the accused and reminds us of the systems that still need challenging. The white check in the tartan is formed of 3 threads that stand for the campaign's 3 aims: pardon, apology, and memorial. In our particular granny square, we don't have a separate white thread. However, wrapped around that gray thread is a white, silver, metallic thread that stands in for the white in this context. The large black section on the tartan, and in this case, in the middle of the granny square, commemorates the long-lasting period that the Witchcraft Act was in force. If you would like to learn more about the official tartan for the Witches of Scotland organization, go to witchesofscotland.com. Now, following the completion of the gray row that has the white, silver, metallic thread wrapped around it, I go in and add the red row, and the red row of single crochet is going to be followed by a row of single crochet in black. But for this row, whenever I reach either the first or the last stitch in that second black row of double crochet, I do a front post triple crochet around each of those stitches so that it looks like there is black thread weaving through as if it were a plaid. You may notice that when doing a front post triple crochet around a stitch a couple rows below, it can distort the edges of the granny square, so it kind of weeble wobbles as it goes from corner to corner. That's okay. We're going to wet block this square when we are done, and as it dries, it'll retain the shape we would like for it to retain. And lastly, we finish off by giving a sturdy border of half double crochet stitches. This is going to help us reach the dimensions we want. All of my granny squares for the end of the year book blanket are about 6 by 6, and also help correct for some of that weeble wobble we may have from those front post triple crochets. Here you can see what the square looks like as we block it out, and again, it will dry and maintain that shape. If you would like to see written instructions for this granny square, drop a comment below and I will add a link to a site where you can get those instructions.